to the August Blue Trails Guide webinar. My name is Faye Augustin, and I am the Associate Director for Blue Trails with American Rivers. Thank you so much for joining us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm really excited to introduce our webinar for this month, Making the Case for Conservation and Recreation, the Upper Nooksack River Recreation Plan. A couple of quick things before we get started. If your connection is lost at all, please go ahead and log in again using your unique web link and passcode that was provided to you when you registered with GoToWebinar. Additionally, as always, this webinar is being recorded and will be available by next Friday, likely earlier, but for sure by then, September 2nd, for viewing at bluetrailsguide.org/blog. Again, my contact information is at the bottom of the screen, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all with technical support or any follow-up questions after the webinar. So we encourage, as always, our participants to ask any and all questions throughout the webinar. There's a question box located in your GoToWebinar side panel where you're able to type in any questions or any questions that you have during the duration of the webinar. If you, as you ask those questions, we will jot them down during the webinar, and then we'll leave about 5 minutes or so at the end of the webinar, and we'll answer as many questions as we can during that time period. Those questions that are not answered will be available after the webinar as a part of our final transcript of questions and answers. That will also be available on September 2nd at bluetrailsguide.org/blog. And with that, I want to turn it over to my lovely colleague, Wendy McDermott, who is an Associate Director for River Protection located in our Bellingham, Washington office. She works on a number of different river protection initiatives, including Wild Scenic and river recreation planning. So with that, I will turn it over to Wendy. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Faye. I am excited to be presenting today on Upper Nooksack River Recreation Plan. I have a jam-packed presentation that I will do my best to get done in about 20 minutes, and so we do have a good 5 minutes to the end for questions. So I am going to go ahead and jump right in. So, there we go. A slight delay in changing the slides. So what is the Upper Nooksack River Recreation Plan? It is a planning document that provides guidance and recommendations for managing non-motorized recreation use in the river corridors of the Upper Nooksack River system. There are over 50 recommendations in the plan that were formulated during a 2-year collaborative community planning process that was led by a diverse advisory committee. The plan recognizes the importance of conservation and restoration of both natural and cultural resources. It is a conceptual plan, a vision. It is not a NEPA decision document, and design level detail is not provided. The recommendations and actions are all voluntary, and it is a resource, reference resource, and an information document that can be incorporated into future planning, such as maybe your local county park planning process. It is a tool for seeking grants to address goals in our plan, and technical assistance was provided by the National Park Service's River Trails and Conservation Assistance Program, commonly referred to as the RTCA program. So, many of you may be wondering where the Nooksack River is. It is the main river of the Nooksack River Basin, located in northwest Washington State. The river flows from Mount Baker, Mount Shuckson, and the Twin Sister Mountain ranges of the North Cascades. The river system is comprised of the North, Middle, and South Forks before forming the main stem, which flows into Puget Sound. The vast majority of the river system lies within Whatcom County, and a portion of the South Fork flows south into Skagit County and then back up north into Whatcom County. This next slide is a gorgeous photo of Mount Shuckson overlooking the North Fork Nooksack. And one other scenery slide here of the North Fork Nooksack. So you can see it's a beautiful northwest river with gorgeous, iconic northwest forest lining the river. The Nooksack River is one of 2 river systems that flows into Puget Sound that support all 5 species of Pacific salmon, as well as steelhead and bull trout. Bald eagles are prevalent, and the area also includes northern spotted owl and marbled murrelet, a seabird habitat, as well as potential grizzly habitat, and a whole host of other fish and wildlife species that call the Nooksack home. The basin also provides amazing world-class recreation such as fishing and hiking and equestrian, as well as boating. There we go. Kayaking, very advanced kayaking, fun Class 3 rafting, and a slalom race that's been taking place, I believe, for about 20 years. The other human uses include, there we go, diverting the waters of the river for supplemental drinking water and to irrigate crops. A little interesting tidbit about the Nooksack in Whatcom County: approximately 65% of all red raspberries grown in the United States are grown right here in Whatcom County. Active timber harvest does exist in the watershed. There's also a great deal of in-channel restoration work taking place, photo in the upper right-hand corner there, such as the placement of engineered log jams, also known as large woody debris. The Nooksack River is also a candidate for protection under the Wild Scenic Rivers Act, and I'd like just to take a couple of minutes to talk about what that designation does. I don't want to assume everyone knows what a Wild Scenic River is. Wild Scenic River designation protects and enhances a river's outstandingly remarkable values. Those values can be anything from recreation to fisheries, to wildlife, to scenic, cultural, and historic. It protects the free-flowing character of a river, primarily through the prohibition of new dams, federally licensed, and other federal nexus dam construction. Prevents degradation of water quality. It establishes a quarter-mile corridor on both sides of the river. In post-designation, the managing agency is required to create a comprehensive river management plan. A little quote there by President Lyndon Johnson, and there we go. If you'd like to read that for a quick second while I take a sip of water. Okay. So why did we do this planning effort? Well, the Nooksack has an active campaign to designate as a wild and scenic river, which American Rivers is quite involved in, and we wanted to help provide a vision for future wild and scenic river management and to engage the local community to help create that vision. While this planning document is not an official Forest Service comprehensive management plan, it can help address issues and inform that planning process. And upon designation as wild and scenic, and when the Forest Service initiates their planning process, we'll be able to submit this plan to that process. The last comprehensive planning that was done in the basin is 40 years old, and we really wanted to foster community engagement around this world-class recreation that exists, because the area wants to market itself better with outdoor recreation. And there's also a need for improving facilities and access. A common misconception about wild and scenic rivers is that it eliminates access and recreation, that it excludes humans, basically. And we wanted to dispel this myth about wild and scenic designations through demonstrating that recreation and wild and scenic rivers are indeed compatible. I mentioned earlier that this could be a tool for seeking grants incorporated into future planning. And one really neat thing about this was that the planning process allowed for cross-jurisdictional discussions and fostered relationships. So a slide about our overview, planning process overview. From inception to completion, this was a 3-year process. There were several opportunities for public engagement, and there were 4 main stages of the process: getting organized, information gathering, analysis and recommendations, and plan production. This next slide is a slide of our planning area. It incorporates the north, middle, and south forks. The focus was on the river corridor, and it's quite similar to the Wild and Scenic proposal. However, we did stretch farther downriver from the Wild and Scenic proposal. I'll use my mouse here. You can see this is sort of the federal land and then public land. And here, everything upstream is the Wild and Scenic designation. We did take the recreation planning focus area beyond that because recreation opportunities do exist, and the communities have some needs for recreation. To kick off the planning process, we hosted a visioning workshop, and at this workshop, we crafted this vision statement, which I'll just let you read on your own, and we formed an advisory committee. This advisory committee is a diverse group of representatives of all these organizations that you see their logos, including federal land management agencies, one of the area tribes, recreation conservation organizations, local businesses, the land trust, etc. At the outset of the planning process, we agreed upon the decision making. We had a smaller core group that met regularly to keep the process on track, and the advisory committee provided guidance and input along the way. This core group and advisory committee were informed by these the technical and public pieces, and should the advisory committee not be able to agree on a certain recommendation, we agreed to represent both sides of the issue in the plan and let the final decision be upon the landowner, whether that be a public or private landowner. All right. One of the aspects was the recreation site inventory and assessment. We identified over 120 recreation sites. Some are well-established trailheads, and others are simply pullouts alongside the road used for fishing or to disperse camping. We were fortunate to partner with Western Washington University in Bellingham, Washington, who created a 2-credit seminar class dedicated to this project. They inventoried the North Fork, took notes on recreation use, documented the site, as well as any impacts to the environment and recommendations for improvement. We utilized contract help and advisory committee member time to complete the inventory on the other forks. And on this left here, you can see the data sheet we used, and the results of the inventory are in Appendix B of the recreation plan. We also conducted an online public survey that went out to the general public via user groups, fishing forums, the newspapers, and social media. As many of you know, there are random sample surveys and open self-selected surveys. This one was an open survey, meaning only one person per computer could take it, but it was open to everyone. As a result, our responses came up as somewhat stacked towards a certain recreational use, mountain biking, very well-organized groups locally, but that's okay. But other needs did come out as well. We asked about types of recreation activities people engage in, what values are important and unique to the Nooksack River Basin, issues recreationists encounter, and a range of recommendations desired in the future. A couple of slides that I found interesting I'd like to highlight. We asked why people come and what was unique about the Nooksack in the recreation plan. We wanted to hold on to what was working. As you can see, there's a range of responses. What came through clearly is the interplay of the recreational setting, so scenery, wilderness feel, remoteness, and pristineness, all came through as very important values in addition to the activities themselves. Next slide also demonstrates that there was high support for salmon restoration, protection from new dam development, protecting recreation access, and we really appreciated hearing this information. Focus group workshops. We hosted 2 focus group workshops, one at the beginning and one at the end, after we formulated the draft recommendations. These focus groups we set up as invitation by invitation sessions, really targeted at folks who knew the area very well, and a diversity of recreation users. The focus groups provided an opportunity for more in-depth discussions and to get more people interested in talking across user interest group lines. We used participatory mapping to get valuable information about what people do, what they value most, issues and recommendations, and the notes from both focus group sessions appear in one of the appendices. From all this data collection, we identified some issues. These issues are listed here. These issues, some of these recognize that recreation does have some impacts on the environment, as well as recognizing some of the recreation needs that are out there and how we can manage that need in a sustainable way. I like to talk about this as sort of an inverted pyramid. If you can picture, we cast this wide net of data collection, information gathering, and then we've been distilling it down towards the apex of, like a V of this pyramid, and 5 main goals that we came up with. They're listed here. First one is the management conservation. We want to support management efforts that will result in improved recreation experiences and environmental protection, as well as supporting some larger scale conservation measures in the river corridors. Interpretation and education, a very strong interest in recreation user responsibility, as well as some specific focus on salmon spawning and impacts humans have on spawning, and promoting programs that support education of recreation users. Goal 3, recreation access. This is to protect existing access. There are many places in this watershed that have road washouts, etc., and we really want to protect what currently exists. Goal 4, this was another main reason why this process was done, was to improve access to the river. It is a river recreation plan focused on the river corridor, and one of the key things that exists, at least on the North Fork Nooksack, is there are existing public put-ins on Forest Service land, but there's actually not a public takeout. So that can create problems if you would like to come boat and not trespass when you take out. Kayakers have a few more options. Boats and heavier equipment such as rafts have less options. Goal 5 is a trail goal. Trails receive a lot of interest from several types of users, and so we have a goal. Each of these 5 main goals within the recreation plan have general recommendations and then site-specific recommendations. This map that'll come up here in a second is a map we developed that appears in we created a pamphlet in addition to the full plan. We strove to ensure that all 5 goals were spread out through the planning area. These are the 5 goals, and you can see the North Fork has many more goals. There's actually a paved state scenic byway that parallels the river. So there's just more access in communities. The Middle Fork has a dirt road, so a little less access. And the South Fork actually is gated right about here. So to be able to get up into this watershed, you have to drive about 2 hours around to access public lands up in here. Along this right side, we came up with 11 early implementation action items that are described in the full plan. And these items were chosen based on ripeness. And I think I should have time to chat just about one or two of those. I wanted to share some lessons learned. Many of you are potentially interested in setting up a process such as this, and I always find it valuable to hear what other people learned. A huge, huge value was the broad-based partnerships and bringing different interests together. Two of the folks, one from the county and one from the Forest Service, they rarely talked to each other before, and so it was a really neat experience for them to actually be able to meet each other and talk with each other about how this shared resource can be better managed. It was very helpful to have the decision process decided ahead of time, and we did have an instance 2 different times where the advisory committee actually didn't agree of over 50 recommendations. That's really good, and we presented both sides in the plan. Communication within organizations and agencies is critical, and the roles that the liaison that those agencies have is critical. We had a couple pitfalls. It's really important to make sure that the advisory committee representative is someone who really can speak for the entity or agency or organization, and will also run things up internally as they need to be done appropriately. One of the things we did was gave presentations as we could to leadership of the respective organizations, and perhaps we should have done this step during the formulation of the recommendation versus at the end. The participatory mapping was a great technique to engage focus group participants. And again, the inventory was just fabulous, as I'd already mentioned. And it's such a great thing when you're presenting in a community to say, you know, we engaged and actually created a 2-credit seminar class of 15 students. Community leaders love hearing that kind of stuff. Important to understand the limitations and benefits of self-selected surveys. And final plan production took so much longer than originally anticipated. Editing took a long, long time. Group editing processes can really be a nightmare, yet it really created ownership and buy-in from advisory committee members. It was really challenging getting committee members who, in some cases, this was way outside their job description to participate, but they saw the value in it. It was challenging sometimes to get them to meet deadlines. And we were even fine-tuning language as we were about to go to press, so not ideal. The design really took more time than it should have, and a big, big learning lesson is really make sure your photo library, you're creating your photo library early and throughout planning, and include photos of people. And we decided to do both a full plan and an informational brochure and pamphlet. That was very funding dependent, and we went back and forth on it, but we're able to find the resources to do both. And we really debated printing versus not printing. And in the end, we printed 100 copies of the full plan. All the appendices are available online only. And then we did about, I think about 500 copies of the pamphlet. And those have both proven to be incredibly useful when you outreach at meetings or presentations, etc. So it is 10:25 Pacific where I'm located. And so I think I'll stop there and allow us to have about 5 minutes for questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wendy, for that really helpful presentation. It was great to learn a little bit more about the tremendous amount of work that you and the rest of the committee did to pull this plan together. So just like Wendy said, we'll open it up to questions at this point. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, if you have specific questions or answers or questions that you would like answered, please feel free to go ahead and type them into the question box. And I will go ahead and just start with the few questions that are already in the question box, and please feel free to continue adding them. So Wendy, from your experience, what seemed to be the best way to engage members of the community? Was it the surveys or the public meetings? Where did you get the most helpful information?
That's a great question. The most helpful information, I think, really came from the focus groups and from the advisory committee. Direct communication with the user groups and having everyone talking together at each focus group. We broke the room into, I believe, 3 tables, like 3 subgroups. And each member of the core planning table was assigned and captured notes, and that was incredibly valuable. We probably got the best information from the focus groups. Turnout for those was okay, about 3 dozen at each focus group, and so that was plenty. There was a difference between the first and second focus group, though, where, for example, the first focus group, we had really strong showing from the angling community, and at the second focus group, I don't think we had anyone show up from angling. So it's sort of, that's just what happened in our situation. I'm not sure why that was.
Great, thanks. Thanks so much, Wendy. A second question for you is, what were some of the issues that you experienced, if any, conflicting between user groups?
The biggest issue we kind of knew about in advance, that was discussed quite a bit, was actually not between recreation user groups. The planning process was really focused at the river corridor level and not in upland. So we didn't really have, say, the conflict of trail networks where you have mountain bikers, hikers, and equestrians, for example, out trying to use the same trails, where some of the sort of conflict comes from within river recreation is salmon recovery and recreation. And that's one of the things we really were sensitive to during this. The community wants to promote river recreation. Salmon recovery entities, of which my organization is one, as well as local tribes, are really working hard to recover salmon population. So during spawning times, it's really important for user education to be aware of how even a dog running across the river or throwing how kids love to skip stones in a river can actually really scare a salmon off their nest, their redd, and potentially create issues. So that really is a big conflict in the area.
Definitely. Well, I think just given time, I'm going to go ahead and stop that with being our last question. We did have a number of questions from folks that we did not get a chance to answer. So those, as always, will be available and as a part of the webinar recording. We'll have a transcript of all of the questions that were asked. I would also like to let you guys know that the electronic copy of the plan is available on the American Rivers website as well as the Blue Trails Guide website. There's a link on the blog now, but I will also go ahead and send out the link to the plan electronically when I send out the recording. So just know that that will be available as well. If you have any additional questions, please, as always, feel free to email me and I can pass your contact information and question along to Wendy, and she can go ahead and answer those more specifically. Otherwise, I would encourage you all to join us back again next month for our September webinar, where we'll be diving into the specifics and how helpful GIS mapping can be for helping to plan for both conservation and recreation. So thank you, Wendy, so much for a really fantastic presentation. And to the rest of our audience participators, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.